Carrie Lam defends government's anti-pandemic measures as she reviews her term of office. City's COVID caseload rise to new highs since April. And government advisor hopes the new administration will renegotiate with mainland over border reopening. Good evening and welcome to TVB News. With just 3 weeks before the current government's term ends, Chief Executive Carrie Lam gave a review of her work over the past 5 years today. She defended her anti-epidemic policies, saying they have no shortcomings. It's just that the government lacks the ability to handle mass infections. Carrie Lam has details.
With less than a month before Carrie Lam steps down as the leader of Hong Kong, she takes a look back at her 5 years as chief executive in the radio program Today. Lam said she had implemented about 90% of her election manifesto, although she did not extend some sections of the Prevention of Bribery Ordinance to cover the chief executive, as she pledged in her election campaign. Lam explained she lacked a full understanding of the one country, two systems principle when she wrote her manifesto, and it would be irresponsible for her to continue following up on the issue, even if it contradicted constitutional order. The chief executive also said she did not regret pushing forward the extradition bill in 2019, and the government was not at fault. She said she had apologized at the time because the government officials responsible failed to explain the bill clearly to the public. As for her decision not to seek a second term of office, Lam said she started planning to leave office last year. But she didn't tell anyone because it will affect her governance. Lam also touched on some livelihood issues, such as the government's work against COVID. Despite the fact that many people questioned the government and civil servants' ability to fend off the virus during the fifth wave of outbreak, Lam said there were no shortcomings with the anti-epidemic measures. Instead, she said the fact is the government does not have the ability to deal with the massive scale of infections in the community. Lam criticized people who tried to sow discord between the people and civil servants. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
Sources say lawmaker Horace Chung is tipped to become the city's Deputy Secretary for Justice. Chung is also the Vice Chairman of the DAB, the Democratic Alliance for the Betterment and Progress of Hong Kong. The 48-year-old, now a LegCo election committee lawmaker, is a practicing lawyer. He became a district councillor in 2012, then a lawmaker 4 years later. In 2017, Chung was appointed a member of the Executive Council. Chung was absent from yesterday's vote in LegCo, during which the Finance Committee endorsed funding Chief Executive-designate John Lee's government restructuring plan. Speaking to the press today, he did not answer directly whether he will join Lee's governing team. It's believed he may take up a post as Deputy Secretary for Justice in charge of promoting the city's rule of law to the mainland and overseas. Still, that drew concerns that Chung's political affiliation would affect public perceptions.
If he is able to act in a very impartial manner, by all means, I think the public will understand. But if you ask me, obviously, if he is able to basically resign from certain very sensitive posts and basically allow him to be more in the public perception in more impartial manner, I think he probably can consider to doing that. Yeah.
The city reported 851 new coronavirus infections, a new high since mid-April. Today's infection cases include 74 imported cases and outbreaks reported from bars.
Hong Kong's COVID-19 infection numbers continue to rise, and health authorities explained why.
There have been transmission chains in the community all along, especially during weekends and long weekends. There are more gatherings of people. Maybe in the past, some people have never been infected, but now they've come out.
2 more bars identified COVID outbreaks involving 31 patients. That includes Rax City on Wynnum Street in Central. 18 customers visited the bar last Saturday between 9 p.m. and 2 a.m. During that period, they played billiards and danced. Some of them developed respiratory symptoms 2 days later. Over at FLM Bar on Jervois Street in Sheung Wan, 13 customers visited the club during midnight last Saturday. Among them is a person who had visited the previously infected bar Link in Central. Authorities will check and see if 2 clusters are related. 5 more cases linked to the bar cluster shuffle have been registered, bringing the total number of infections to 118. Meanwhile, 2 more patients confirmed with the BA.2.12.1 mutant strain with unknown sources of infection were identified. That includes a 61-year-old woman who lives in Shatin and another patient who lives in Taipo. The 57-year-old is in charge of dishwashing at the Cathay Pacific Lounge at the airport, and she has not been in contact with anyone. The Po Leung Kuk Lam Man Chan English Primary School logged 7 more COVID infections. A total of 14 students and teachers of the school have tested positive, and health authorities believe the cases were infected in the community.
Government pandemic advisor Professor David Hui today said Hong Kong has the capacity to open up to the outside world, citing the high vaccination rate the city has achieved. And he advises the next term government should renegotiate with the mainland authorities about the resumption of quarantine-free travel. Christy Khan reports.
Commenting on the recent increase in the number of daily COVID infections, government's pandemic advisor Professor David Hui said it is due to the relaxation of social distancing measures and importation of cases. But he said the people in the city should not be too worried.
Currently, we are only seeing like BA.2.12.1 and BA.4, BA.5. These are only sub-variants of the Omicron. And the current vaccines like the Sinovac and BioNTech, they are still highly effective in preventing severe disease, hospitalization and death.
But he said the vaccination rate of high-risk groups and children aged 3 to 11 is still far from satisfactory. Furthermore, Hui thinks Hong Kong is ready to open up to both the world and the mainland. He hopes the incoming administration can restart negotiation with the mainland authorities on the criteria for reopening the border with the mainland.
Currently, we have achieved reasonably high vaccination rates, so we do have the capacity to reconnect with the outside world. However, to a lot of people, reopening the border with the mainland is also very important. So they have business there, they have families there.
He added if opening up internationally becomes the priority, the government should consider further relaxing the border control measures, like shortening the hotel quarantine or allowing people to undergo quarantine at home. Christy Khan, TVB News.
During the previous 2 waves of the pandemic, a public hospital deployed doctors from other departments to help treat COVID patients. The United Christian Hospital said, for example, it moved doctors from ophthalmology and psychiatry departments to cope with the manpower shortage. Prior to the deployment, these doctors would have to learn the treatment procedures for 1 to 2 days. Then they would be appointed as attending doctors of the COVID patients, supervised by senior surgical peers. The hospital added it will further improve the deployment system, such as transferring the patients with mild symptoms to the isolation wards in the specialist departments. Therefore, severe patients can stay at general medical wards to have treatment. Still ahead on tonight's news, Chinese and the U.S. defense chief discussed Taiwan during meeting in Singapore. U.S. prices are surging as a result of record high inflation. And a new team of customs dogs will help defend the city. Welcome back. The defense ministers of China and the United States met at the 19th Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore today. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said China was adopting a more aggressive approach in its territorial claims, but he reiterated that Washington does not support Taiwan independence. Nazvi Karim has more.
Defense Minister Wei Fenghe and U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin met for the first time during the 19th Shangri-La Dialogue, a regional forum on security. Austin said the United States remains firmly committed to the One China policy, though he also said China was adopting a more coercive and aggressive approach in its territorial claims, and its fishing fleet was causing tensions with neighbors. And Taiwan was the focus of the talks.
So let me be clear. We remain firmly committed to our long-standing One China policy. Guided by the Taiwan Relations Act, we categorically oppose any unilateral changes to the status quo from either side, and we do not support Taiwan independence. we will continue to fulfill our commitments under the Taiwan Relations Act. And that includes assisting Taiwan in maintaining a sufficient self-defense capability.
A spokesman for the Ministry of Defense said Defense Minister Wei Fang-he warned that if anyone dares to split Taiwan from China, the Chinese military will fight at all costs to smash any secessionist attempt. Wei also stressed the One China principle is the political foundation of China-US relations, and using Taiwan to contain China is doomed to fail. Wei added stable relations between the two militaries were crucial to bilateral relations and that they must avoid conflict and confrontation. Meanwhile, Austin also met his South Korean and Japanese counterparts, where discussions included North Korea's recent missile tests. Japanese Defense Minister Nobuo Kishi said North Korea must not be allowed to threaten Japan, the region, and the international community. Pyongyang recently test-fired 8 short-range missiles and is expected to soon conduct its first nuclear detonation in 5 years. Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
U.S. President Joe Biden has described the January 6th Capitol riot in 2021 as one of the darkest chapters in the country's history. Biden was speaking at the Summit of the Americas in Los Angeles one day after a Congress hearing into the insurrection that laid the blame firmly at the feet of former President Donald Trump. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, meanwhile, said the forces behind the riot will suffer the consequences.
It's important to the American people to understand what truly happened and to understand that the same forces that led January 6th remain at work today. It's about our democracy itself. We have to protect our democracy, and we're seeing how the battle for the soul of America has been far from won. But I know together, and I mean this, we can unite and defend this nation, Democrat and Republican, and allow no one to place a dagger at the throat of our democracy. That's what those hearings are all about.
That was an attempt to overthrow the government. That was an attempt to, as an insult to our Constitution. It is something that has specific consequences for those who are engaged in.
U.S. inflation has reached a 40-year high with an 8.6% year-on-year rise in May. Prices on everything from food, home prices to gasoline keep going up, and a possible consequence is a further interest rate rise. This report from NBC News.
The red arrows on Wall Street represent real money for American families. Mutual funds, 401ks, college savings, and pensions all sliding. As today's report shows inflation even worse than last month, now running at 8.6%, the fastest pace since 1981. And there is nowhere to hide. Food up 10.1%, led by soaring egg prices as bird flu ravages chicken flocks. Housing up 5.5%, and gasoline surging every day. $4.99, today's national average, but $6.42 a gallon in California.
I'm stopping at 40. I'm not going over 40. I don't care where it gets me.
Also driving inflation higher, airfares. Domestic airfares averaging $403 round trip. From here in Atlanta out to L.A., up 65% from 2019. From New York to Denver, up 58% from 2019. From Chicago down to Orlando, up 47%. At American Coney Island in Detroit,
here you go, you're all set.
Third-generation owner Grace Karros says her costs have soared this year.
26% on buns, 12% on a paper bag, 25% on a hot dog, almost 30% on ground beef and chicken.
In Los Angeles today, President Biden blamed the higher prices worldwide on shippers who are price gouging and Russia's war in Ukraine.
But we've never seen anything like Putin's tax on both food and gas.
Many economists also blame pandemic-related stimulus money and the Fed for not acting sooner. Now the pressure is building on Chairman Jerome Powell to raise interest rates even faster to bring inflation under control. Some experts calling for a full 1% hike next week.
He's got to get control of that narrative and say, listen, we're not going to dribble out the medicine. Let's take it now.
But while pay raises have been wiped out by inflation, unemployment remains near 50-year lows for now.
You know what? We're still here. We're still serving customers, and the sun is shining.
North Korea has promoted its key nuclear negotiator as the new foreign minister, according to state media. Cho Sun-ho has been the North's key official in negotiations over its nuclear program with the United States. She was appointed as the top diplomat at a plenary meeting of the Central Committee of the Workers' Party of Korea. At the meeting, which took place from Wednesday to Friday, Kim Jong-un stressed the need to strengthen the country's defense capabilities. The new appointment comes as the U.S. warns that Pyongyang is preparing to conduct a 7th nuclear test. Back locally, in order to better protect the city against illegal and dangerous imports, the Customs and Excise Department has recently been joined by 8 new furry members as a batch of locally bred puppies will be trained to become detector dogs. Early next year, the canines will begin their services at the airport and the Hong Kong boundary crossing facilities. Timothy Lee has the story.
These obstacles proved no challenge to these young Labradors. Filled with limitless energy, these 8 Labradors from the Canine Force are only 4 months old. They consist of 5 males and 3 females, and are named Dolly, Ellie, Fatty, Eagle, Nico, Dolby, Hunter, and Kilo. Combining the first letters of their names creates the acronym Defend Hong Kong, symbolizing the puppy's mission. The Customs Canine Force said the Labradors also marked a new chapter of cooperation between 2 law enforcement and security parties.
This is the first time for Hong Kong Customs to team up with the Aviation Security Company Limited, AFSECO, to have a canine breeding program, and have successfully bred 8 Labrador puppies on 5th of February this year.
Upon reaching the ages of between 9 months to 1 year old, 6 of the puppies will enter service with Customs, while the rest will join airport security. Currently, most detector dogs are trained to sniff out drugs, but Customs officers aim to train these new Labradors to effectively detect contraband such as explosives and firearms.
Behind me are the newest members of the Customs Canine Force. The trainers are using different materials and level structures to train the Labradors to improve their senses and to boost their courage. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
That's the news. Thanks for watching.